Welcome to Revenue Architects, where we talk about everything revenue. Today, my special guest and my friend, Matt Bischoff from United Site Services. He's the Director of Sales Enablement. And Matt, why don't we go ahead and have you give a quick introduction to our audience, and then let's talk revenue.
Steve, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really grateful for this, and I look forward to the conversation about revenue. It's one of my favorite topics. My name is Matthew Bischoff. I'm Director of Sales Enablement at United Site Services. We are a site services company that works with construction, industrial, and event companies to provide temporary services. My career has been, I've been a salesperson for, 30 years. I've worked in the food industry for a majority of my time, markets in the United States, looking at multinational and international customers, and have sold products, consulting services, very diverse career, and I enjoy sales. Sales is a unique field where you have the opportunity to get up in front of another person and convince them to try something new. I believe it is a calling, and in my role as Director of Sales Enablement, it's really about helping people do that better. I think it's an opportunity to help people to be the best they can at the moment they need to be. And that's a lot of what I focus on.
Oh man, as a sales trainer myself, it just touches my heart. But of course, as we're talking revenue, I want to talk about forecasting first and going forward. What do we revenue teams having to deal with to effectively move forward in this process of getting better at sales, getting better at process?
I think forecast, we spend a lot of time on forecasting. There's requirements for it. Our operations teams need it. Our finance teams need it. Our corporate partners need it. It's so important to the entire organization. And from a sales perspective and a sales enablement perspective, it always comes down to pipeline, right? As every salesperson, the pipeline is the most important thing. When you start putting a microscope on forecast and you're looking at opportunities that are in stages and that are moving through that pipeline, it's all about pipeline quality and cleanliness.
So how have you done it? I know that's one of the things that when we first met, you were really developing something at a level as a sales leader. Get a better forecast, do a better job of that. What did you put into play just to make it more effective for your company?
The sales enablement perspective, you have four big buckets, right? You have content, you have tools, you have process, and you have metrics. And forecast is probably one of our most important metrics. And what we had to look at from the initial perspective is you have to look at the talent, you have to look at your people. Do they have as a good friend of mine talks about all the time, do they have to have the skill and they have to have the will to be able to do that job? And you have to look at that first, right? You have to look at your people and make sure you have the right people in the right seats. I think the second piece that's really important is that once you've established that your sales team is the sales team you're going to market with, you need to look at those interactions that they have from the initial call with the lead all the way through to when the deal is closed, and looking through that steps, looking through each one of those steps and looking at the sales processes that actually match, right?
Never matches.
Does it add, or is it close enough? Is it close enough for you to say, hey, what actually happens with the customer? Does it match the way you deliver information to the customer, whether that's a quote, an order, an invoice? How is it all connected? And sometimes some companies are hard, right? If you've been to a company that has had lots of acquisitions, multiple systems, multiple data, it comes to your favorite topics, Steve, right? Yeah. Data cleanliness. Data's never clean. But I think the cool part about, you just have to understand where you are. And there's lots of tools, there's lots of experts, there's people like yourself that can come in and help you do that. That's really important. But then that always has to be balanced against how quickly can I do it, right? Everybody wants it tomorrow.
Right.
A lot of people don't understand looking at that hygiene process, what it actually entails and what you can do to do that.
Matt, I want to go back to where you started in sales management. Right about where we met, you were mapping process in a way that no one else in your team or at your level were doing, trying to compensate for what wasn't happening upstairs in the RevOps department. And it had a tremendous effect on you actually getting upstairs. So talk to me a little bit about what you did to build in the micro steps it takes to get revenue to be more effectively obtained with your team? Because you were top in sales and your team was too. Show us how you did it.
We were pretty close to the top, Steve. I don't want to take all that credit. There were some really good performing teams out there. And when we first started this, the forecasting has been a journey. And we didn't really have a RevOps group at all. We had sales operations and sales leaders and finance, the ultimate arbiter of all things. But the part of the journey that I started with was, again, we talked about sales process, but we really had to have an accurate picture. I'm a sandbagger from way back. As a salesperson, it's almost like another muscle that you talk about, right? It's almost something, you have a fear of giving a number in a room. When you're on phone calls with large groups, I would always coach my teams, don't give a number on the phone, because it's the only one they remember. They never remember the one on the PowerPoint. They never remember anything else except the one you said on the call. I didn't realize at the time how wrong that actually was. So when we started the process, it was to get a more honest picture of what happens throughout the sales process. It's okay to lose. And I think there was that piece of creating that culture. We're going to win some and we're going to lose some. When we're winning them, we just have to make sure that all the information that we have in there is good. Fill out all the fields as the basic.
But that's so not what salespeople like to do. And young people in the crowd, the sandbagging is when you try to act like you're not going to get
We like to call it conservative estimation.
Oh,
right? Is that a conservative
under...
estimation of what the results were?
Yeah.
Usually far below what you think you can actually achieve.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to reduce expectations before you knock it out of the park. This is classic sales problem. And what we're trying to tell you is don't do that, but we know you're going to do it.
It's really bad.
And then the second thing is put all the data in Salesforce or your CRM, and we know you don't do that either.
This is the part that, like, revenue operations, sales operations can help the salesperson.
Cool. So how did you get that part done? Because you seem to have taken it on at a sales manager level.
Yeah, so at a sales manager level, I would really highlight the information that I needed to tell the story. So when you have to go to those meetings with the sales VPs, when you would have to go to those C-level meetings and those monthly reviews.
So you can sandbag.
No. So you can tell a story of momentum and revenue generation. That's what you have to do in those meetings, and it's really important. And you have to be able to give the information because those people that are in that room got there because they double click. They take the information and look at it and ask questions. And you have to be able to answer those questions. Because I think the worst thing as a sales leader is you can go through a forecasting call and they ask information and you don't know the answer. It's important for you to understand. I love the numbers. I enjoy the data. And that was one of my strengths, was to really understand the pipeline and the customer and where they were in the process, knowing the deals that it takes for people to really be able to close the deal effectively. So you can say in that call, you can say in those forecasting meetings, this will close.
But I think that's one of the things I appreciated about you, that you love the data, but you also prioritize the data to give you the best way to tell a story, both upstairs and guide your teams into effectively closing deals with much more consistency. And that consistency is one of the things that I think you did really well. And I think it showed, which is why you're outside of sales management now and above, helping design that system for the next leaders.
I do agree. I agree with you. You have to know the information. What the challenge, like moving from like a sales management role into a revenue operations group, some sales managers get very good at their market. They understand it, they know it. But to take what those good practices that you've done and be able to scale them across a nationwide business is challenging. It takes the ability to compromise on something you've had success in one area, but might not work in another one, and being able to change it.
Sure.
I believe you have to be humble in the approach with your ideas. As a salesperson, we have a lot of self-confidence, Steve.
Yeah, humility is not the best characteristic for most salespeople.
And because we stand in front of somebody and convince them to try something.
We got to believe it.
You got to believe it, and you have to be genuine, because people can spot non-genuine people very quickly. I think going back to like our overarching theme around forecasting, like having these consistency is king. You have to be able to say, if you're in a prospecting phase, the company has to know what that means. The salesperson has to know what that means, and the sales manager has to. It has to all mean the same thing. And when those definitions become inconsistent, the data is going to be inconsistent. It's not reliable.
So you'd say the key to new revenue management these days is literally having the same definition for what is actually successful, and then making sure everyone's executing to those same by holding them accountable, giving them the data that gathering and giving the data they need to be able to make better decisions. And that has to align both in technology, but in practice and management and the environment that you create in your sales team. I'd like to talk to you more about the bridging the gap between the management and the revenue management side of things and the front line. And what we've been talking about is really one of those things is getting the right data. But sometimes the top is asking for the wrong data. And how do you help them understand the difference between quota attainment and deal closing to actually really impact revenue in a positive way?
A couple of ways to look at that. I always come from the sales process angle, but I'm going to try to answer this more from the management perspective, because this is really quota attainment for a salesperson is everything. And if you exceed quota, that's where the real money comes in, right? Everybody has some kind of over 100% type bonus commission, or if you're a commission carrying salesperson, quota carrying salesperson. Management looks at it from a couple of perspectives. I think one, from an enablement perspective, the way we will look at it is looking at that quota attainment and deciding whether is this a market issue? Is it a training or enablement issue? Is it a performance issue? And those are three pretty big buckets. If it's a performance issue and you're looking at it, are they doing the work? That's when you get into that whole KPI discussion.
That's the get this done, how many appointments, how many quotes did you do, that kind of thing?
And sometimes as sales manager, you can treat every one of those three categories as a performance issue. And when you do that, you over-index like on KPIs, right? And instead of getting the behavior you want, you're going to be getting behavior you don't want. You're going to get someone resistant because it's not necessarily a KPI issue when it might be a market issue.
Hey, can we diverge here? I want to hear a story about when you resisted a KPI overload where a manager was giving you the wrong kind of KPIs.
That probably happens. I have a little bit of a reputation for my ability to discuss these topics in meetings, right? And I really take from my time in the CPG industry, was working with a bunch of very smart people that you had to be so prepared every single day. Every question they asked really you knew it was like the first question of three, right? So you knew that there was going to be more coming. So it really prepared me for a lot of these discussions. Sometimes when you look at someone's attainment and they're 110% performance, great salesperson, right? Doing their job, they're in their customers. And then the KPI discussion will come up and they say, we only have 38 meetings and we really want 45 meetings.
That was me.
Yep. And my perspective is, I said, that's one piece of the puzzle, for sure. And meetings are important. But let's look at their attainment and let's look at their account penetration and let's look at some of these other factors that are not necessarily. And that was where you could really have a better discussion to really look at the true performance of a salesperson and not just be limited by quota attainment is the most important thing. Our job as salespeople is to bring in revenue. Revenue is what drives the machine, right? For functions that are like sales enablement, revenue operations, we all own parts of that revenue piece, but if the deal doesn't close, we don't have work to do.
So how do you get through that? Confession, I had a better conversion rate and never had the right number of appointments, and they always yelled at me for not having enough appointments. They said, just give me more. And I know you probably had the same problem.
Oh, yeah.
But how do you move that, the disconnect between RevOps and revenue leadership and what the field is actually doing? Because when it comes down to it, they needed people more like you and me who are doing better conversion rates. And what did you do when you started to move across from the field into the revenue leadership? What was some of the conversations you were having? Or just give me one example of a conversation that you'd have with other revenue leaders about some disconnect between those KPIs and the front line.
The transformation from sales operations to revenue operations, I think, is so timely because revenue operations serves as, from my perspective, as a bridge between the corporate strategy, the financial expectations, the high-level reporting to the field. Whether that's a call center or whether it's a field sales team, they are the bridge. And as revenue operation leaders, it's our job to make sure we paint the entire picture and take away the focus from one. Because everybody can nail one number down. It's easy to do. What is harder to do is to look at the whole picture that might have 4 or 5 different things that you're looking at, and to be able to connect them and tell the story. And in revenue operations, that's our job. Because a lot of revenue operations, they own the tech stack, they have the data people. We have a talented group of data people that are able to look at the information, slice and dice any way you want. We probably have more data. And then you have the enablement people that have sales experience, management experience to come in with all those groups and paint a better picture. That's the secret sauce. And I think companies are really looking at it from that perspective now, and I think that's why you're seeing more revenue operations departments. I think you're seeing that transformation in sales because a lot of people, not if they're public companies, but if they're privately owned or equity owned, that call for revenue is very important. You can paint a picture that guides the discussion to where that's going to meet the company's goals. That's the important piece.
You made an interesting point. It seems like the revenue ops now with a better command of data, because it's easier to gather data. And once they get a better handle on the right data, sales enablement can play a better role in creating a better story that drives the behaviors the field needs to be taking in order to actually achieve the goal of better revenue, as opposed to achieving more appointments that might or might not make any difference.
Very much, and I make this reference a lot at work and people make fun of it. But I think the reference that I make is that we have to be the speed bump on the way out to the sales organization. And then we also have to be the speed bump on the way into the corporate information, into the corporate shared services piece. So I think that is an important job, oversimplified of course, but I think we have to take a pause, take a beat, take a minute before when we roll out a new strategy to make sure we have tied everything together so the team can effectively sell to the customer, and ultimately so the customer can have a great experience. Customer journey where you're bringing in marketing and all these other groups is important. That customer profile is becoming more and more important because it's a roadmap for the organization to interact with that customer.
And as the customer expectations are changing, you've got to figure out where they're going, and that's only done through data.
Yeah.
So.
Data is important. It's never going to be clean, right? It's never going to be the cleanest you want it to be. You hope it. You have aspirations to do that. What makes it exciting is that as long as the organization is on the journey to make that better and take the necessary steps, you're going to see results.
All right, Matt, so let's move on to deal velocity, our favorite comprehensive concern. How is the new revenue management approaches, both technologically and the development from sales ops to RevOps, affecting deal velocity in your viewpoint or at your company?
The sales defense to that deal velocity is that every deal is different, but generally the interactions are the same. And if the sales team can have good discipline and cadence on the way they're interacting, utilizing their system, which is perfectly designed to help them manage that and scale to a certain number of accounts, they can find success and deal velocity can go down. And when deal velocity goes down, the forecast gets even better because it is not sandbagging, Steve, but if you get to that part where you look at a deal and you've had a standard approach to deals and you've unlocked something that can turn that deal a little quicker and you achieve that number a little faster, that's the goal. That's what the finance teams are looking for. That's what the operations teams are looking for. Sometimes it can come quick and surprise them, but if you can find out on what interaction is going to make that deal go faster, it's beneficial. Depends a lot too on markets. Some business is more transactional.
Sure.
They can be same day closes. They can make a cold call and get an order. Larger, bigger deals, they can take a few months, and depending on your services. Like enterprise software sales, a much longer cycle than renting a portable toilet. It's a very different gap in deal velocity. However, the standardization of looking at the sales process and making sure that we're interacting to the basics. We've sent a quote. Did you follow up? And overcoming where they maybe have sent out 50 quotes. And how do we help them manage that from that sales process and system? Obviously, Salesforce is a great tool, and it's built to do that. That can help. But when we take that information and we're looking at forecasting and we look at stages of where things are, if we know that something is in the second stage of a 5-stage sales cycle, if we are doing the same thing that we've done in every sale, we can have a reasonable expectation of what the velocity of close should be.
So you're mapping your key performance indicators, how to bring in the right stakeholders, and finding the commonalities in all of your deals. There is always commonality in some basic things, while every customer is custom. So the salespeople, it's always been our goal to, when we're not sure how far the deal is going, we all tend to just say it's really custom and this deal is different than all the others, even though it looks just like the others. And
deals are always bigger than we think.
we have to fluff it and sandbag and do all these other things to help us feel better about it. But when we nail the process down into the key performance behaviors that actually get the deal moving, it really helps you eliminate a lot of the guesswork, and it helps you pick up your deal velocity because you know exactly what the next right thing is.
Yes.
Oh, I need to get this person on the phone. I need to do a demo. I need to have a follow-up on my calls or my quote, and that helps you get there. But what are you seeing when it comes to getting those translation of the key performance indicators effectively both from the field and then translated back into the systems and the processes that are built in from the revenue leadership?
When you're sitting in the finance meeting, they don't care about the customer interactions. They want to talk about how many quotes are we converting. They want to talk about how many orders did we get, because they don't trust those numbers.
Sure.
They don't trust it. And depending on your organization and things, that information, building up that trust takes reliable time. It takes time.
Sure.
And reliable data. And I think that if you start the process to be consistent, as we talked about earlier, if you start that process to be consistent, I think you can really build the trust with the finance group. So when we start to talk about those numbers, they're not rolling their eyes or checking their Teams chat or whatever they're doing when they're not listening to you at that point. It's about, like you would with a customer, like you're building trust, you're selling all the time.
You're selling in every direction.
You're selling in every direction. You're selling to your manager. You're selling to leadership. Leadership is selling to their investors. You're always selling. And it all comes down to the data, right? And how it is. And if you can tell the story using a lot of that data and they can trust it, I think that's a big piece.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some situation where you have had to deal with owning the execution of the revenue. Sometimes there's an expectation that the revenue management team is supposed to do that, but that doesn't always happen. And you didn't have that when you first got into sales leadership. So give us a kind of an understanding of what it takes to either own it from where you are.
I think it depends on the level of sales management. At the time when I really got into my latest organization here, is that you had full P&L responsibility. Yep, so you own top. You were paid on the top, but you own the bottom just as well. You're an EBITDA company, and it's very important to understand the inputs of both. I think one of the key factors that kind of made me successful is understanding to the nth degree the full P&L. Understanding where all the sources of revenue, what contributes to those categories, what's looking at, where are those numbers coming from? And being able to understand the changes in those values month over month and what's driving it.
So you were like the finance team. Yeah, you're just digging through, finding out.
And you work so closely with them.
Interesting.
It's because, something can get coded wrong and your number is blown. And not only is it defeating to you as like a sales leader, it changes the whole expectation of your team because then they don't trust the numbers.
Sure.
So spending a lot of time during those last week of the month and that first week of the close, spending the time to really understand what happens in that process. And I've had a lot of success with that. You get a very quick lesson on accruals and how they work, how they can be your friend or your enemy, and usually they're frenemies. Looking through that process and really understanding it to try to make a number, and then conveying that, hey, you've gone to your team, I know this number, let me walk you through what it is. Gives them confidence that the numbers that they receive from like their quota attainment and their commission is going to be accurate. You have to carry the banner. And the only way you can do that is really to be an effective like revenue leader is to really understand the numbers. It has been the secret throughout my entire career.
I will add to that that I think you do a really good job of translating that knowledge to help your team, your field team, understand why that number matters and that it's being watched. And that extra component, as opposed to just knowing the numbers, makes the big difference between someone who is good at managing and someone who is leading their team. And because when they begin to see, I do this action, translates to this behavior, this result, which gives me this number and that amount of revenue, and then I get commission, sweet.
Yep.
That's where they're like, I can trust this person, and then your boss can trust your forecast, and they don't have to give you a 40% discount on your forecast because you're shady all the time, and they're like, no, this is why this number is here, and they can trust those numbers. And that played out for you in real ways. The last question I just want to jump right into with that is you were able to take a lot of that data and translate it into actual results inside of Salesforce, inside your CRM. So you were able to take all that information that you understood, but also the process that you were getting your team to execute, to show it in a system that they could turn around and repeat and pass around. So talk to me a little bit about how you valued the Salesforce side, the technology side, to enable all this extra revenue management.
I've been working in Salesforce now for 20 of my 30 years. It's been the system of record for a few companies that I've worked at. I'm learning to become like system agnostic. And what I would do as a sales leader is I'm not sure that I would want the organization to do now. And I think it's a little bit of learning upon that. Something that we talk about on my team now, and I'm very lucky with a very good teammates who are very smart, much smarter than I am. And you know, what we try to talk about is one path, right? Really giving, we don't want salespeople to be sales admins.
Of course.
I don't want them to be experts in generating list views and reports and analyzing the data. As a sales leader, that's your job. That's why the organization has you on board. We want the salespeople to spend as much as their time selling. There's going to be admin work, and to try to streamline that and to create that one path now is really a big focus. But when I was a sales leader, I was the dashboard king, right? I had a dashboard for every day of the week. I had it for every sector of customer, and everybody who's familiar with Salesforce, I think I had 17 pin tabs, right? Because it was just the ability to be able to look at information quickly so I could make a decision. I've never been shy about making a decision, right? I've made some good ones, made some bad ones. From a data perspective and looking at Salesforce, I think really what I want the team to focus on is one path. It's supposed to be a tool that's supposed to help you scale. People that have account books now have 70 to 80 to 90 accounts. That's a lot to manage, but we have a system that helps you manage that. You can't manage 90 accounts in a notebook.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And the people that try to do that are the ones that fall into one of those, that third category. Those are the performance people. They have to accept and bring it into their process because it's not going away. Yep. And I think with all the other things we've talked about, that data piece, having it clean, bringing them trust in the information, if you can demonstrate that as a sales leader to the salesperson, they're on board. Yep. They do it.
All right. So I think one of the things, the big takeaway for me is the idea of thinking around, you're selling all the ways around. And so the data that you're giving as a salesperson, better data allows your sales manager to celebrate and champion you better, help you with deals that are stuck, help you move your deal velocity forward. The manager can give better data to the leadership and RevOps and others and sales enablement, and this is what we need. And so it gives you a much better approach when you actually prioritize the right kind of data that helps you tell the right kind of story. So Matt, I really appreciate that. Is there any other thought you'd have?
I want to share one thing, because
Sure, go ahead.
data is king, right? Data is important, systems are important. At the end of the day, everything we do is an interaction between people, right?
Yeah.
And people are an important part of that process. Data can strengthen people, and it can have the opposite effect as well. It can weaken people as well. And I think our responsibility as revenue leaders is to not forget the people. Data can get you 90% of the way there. But it's that last 2% when you have to cross the finish line, close the deal, that it does come down to the person. You can have all the data in the world, but if you can't get that conversation to go where it needs to go, you're not going to win. You can help support that conversation, get them there with the data. You can train them on the questions to ask, or the way you want to set up the meeting. And you can show them the data, how it works, but the person has to believe, and they have to be genuine, right? That the customer is going to accept that and really make a new partnership.
Absolutely.
It's just an important piece.
Yeah, and we know that the best salespeople always have the people data in it, and it's the relationship that's actual data translated to be able to help you understand how to get the influence you need to win.
Yep.
So Matt, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your architectural knowledge of revenue with us. So tune in to other podcasts we're going to have, and we appreciate you stopping in and joining us today.